pleasure to welcome the lovely Clair Warner. So Claire is Head of Service at Newbridge Outreach in Redbridge, specialising in supporting pupils who, do you know what, Claire, I'm going to let you say it because your presentation is way much better than mine. Claire looks after Sam's case with her son Jude, and I'm going to leave it to you, Claire. Over to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Okay, no worries. I'm probably going to need Lynette to share my presentation. Would you be able to do that, Lynette?
Yeah,
and then
sure.
I'll introduce myself. So Sam sent me a message early into lockdown and said, Claire, would you help? And I'm like, yeah, that's no worries. I came to your event up in Leicester last year and spoke at your conference. So I was like, yeah, no, you've got lovely families. Yeah, happy to help. And then, if I'm honest, have just been working 16-hour days, so didn't give it any more thought whatsoever until Sam sent me the link to this evening and said, this is who's speaking. I was like, that's not me. But anyway, I thought what I would do is explain who I am and why I'm here. So I work in Redbridge, which is a East London borough, have 107 schools. And when I went into lockdown, I was a long-standing manager of a physical medical team. So we see students from about 18 months to 25. All the way through post school to college. My real interest is dystrophy. I have 13 families that we support in the borough at the moment, several with more than one sibling, and dyspraxia is another thing that I'm particularly interested in. I also, during COVID, it's been a weird time for somebody that works in the local authority because it appears to be a time where you either sunk or you swam. I wouldn't say I swam, I just survived. So I also now manage a hearing impaired team, a visually impaired team, and an SEMH team as well, because the managers of those teams sort of stepped down. So I have a huge team around me, but my passion has always been around students with physical and medical needs. I'm also a PD ambassador for the UK. There's 20 of us that are funded by the government. It's an extra funding, and it's around lobbying both government and schools and local authorities to make the best opportunity for our students. So that's my day job. I have a national job. And I also am really passionate about getting to teachers before they even start. Before you joined us, I was just telling Lynette a story about how I pick on newly qualified students and make them come and be my volunteer. So because I'm very passionate about inclusion and making sure the right provision is for every student. So that's really where I am. That's my professional world. I also have a daughter who was fine till she was 4. So although I don't walk the same pathway as you, I had the same experience of having a child where there was no apparent needs, and then she became very, very unwell. And my grey hair, the bits that's not dyed, will be testament to the challenges we've had. And she has a range of medical, she's under about 5 different hospitals. And then just when we thought we were on the right track and she was doing A-levels 18 months ago, she decided to lose quite a bit of her eyesight. So she's now legally blind. Having said that, while I've been speaking, she has gone outside. She's also been shielding, so we've been living the shielding life the same as you have. But she's also now decided to open an Etsy business. Put her COVID lockdown, I think the boredom of being with her mum and dad and no siblings drove her to set up a business. So there's been some positives with lockdown as well. So that's who I am, and that's really where I'm at. So that's my experience and sort of where my passions lie. I think I need a signal with Lynette now, won't we, in terms of the next one. Thank you. Okay.
Can you see it, guys? Yeah. Lovely.
Okay. So Sam said to me, this is what we would like you to do, Claire. And I was like, okay. And normally when I speak, we can say, you know, this is tried and tested, or this worked for this group of students, or we did this in this particular type of school or with this group of families. But, you know, I'm in this with you. I'm a shielding lockdown family with you. And so really what I'm going to talk about over the next sort of hour or so is really what I have in my head, and Sam knows me very well, and it's fairly random collection of values and information, but it was also beginning to very slowly begin to think about, well, actually, in terms of our students going back to school, what would we want to use these next 5 weeks to do to begin to prepare a little bit? And I am not the special needs advisor that will talk to you about handwriting books. I'm not somebody that's bothered really particularly about a spelling test. I'm bothered about the whole person. And so really tonight's just about some ideas, and it's about trying to work out together as a group what may work for you and what may not.
I pushed it on, but it's not working. Oh, there we are. Okay.
That's why I got you to do it, so then I could pass the blame. You know, at the moment there are no answers. I haven't done this, you haven't done this. Nobody has a toolkit that we go, well, okay, this works. So I don't mean to disappoint you, but I'm coming at this conversation with no answers, just some suggestions. So it's really about having that in mind. I'm not trying to tell any of you how to parent your child, because we've all got different dynamics, but it's just some suggestions that maybe you won't have thought of. Okay. So this new normal is quite interesting for me, because you hear it all the time. This is our new normal. This is the new normal for us. But it's really weird for me in that this has always been how my career's been. I have a student that comes with a diagnosis that nobody's ever heard of. Nobody ever knows what's going to happen, and nobody can tell me a timeline. So what we have to do is create a story around that person based on who they are, where they want to be, and how we get there. So it's really unusual for me. Obviously, the new normal is unusual because we're not living our life, we're not going out, the families that are shielding. But in terms of how we begin to build, and I'm using Sam's son's best analogy of Lego bricks, is that how we begin to then build some structure around us to go forward will look very different. I can see on the screen Helen and Lynette, so I'm just going to use you two as an example. But you know, I'm sure your children are very different. So the Lego bricks that you bring together will look as a very different sort of patchwork. But actually, for me, it's not particularly different, other than I'm doing it with different environmental constraints. But how I put it together is quite different. So there is no right and wrong. So again, I'm trying to keep the expectations of this evening's quite low. So I've already told you I have no ideas. I've already told you I've never done it. And I've also told you that we're going to put a lot of this back to you. So I'm trying not to set the expectations too high. So really, this is just about some ideas. So this is currently how all the people who work in education look this week, because most of us have got here. A large proportion of us have been doing 16, 18-hour days throughout the holidays and bank holidays to provide support. But it's really interesting because lots of our direct support has been around talking to families. And whilst we may feel like this, I'm very aware that our families don't feel like that, because we're in this incredibly extended period of time where I sort of pick up when I'm phoning families and I'm sort of Skype calling families, people are generally more chilled about things. Paces are generally routines or lack of routine, but basically everybody's getting by. Days are going by, but I think tolerance is shorter. So I think generally I'm picking up most people are a bit more chilled than they were at the beginning, where there was that enormous panic and terror. But actually people's tolerance for very small things is just not as great.
And also, I think people are running out of ideas and steam, and also
Yes.
kind of not boredom setting in, but kind of the
And I
same
think,
old.
I think most people did the similar thing at the beginning, where everybody was like, right, we're cooking, we're making biscuits, I'm feeding you 3 packets of crisps while I'm trying to make a phone call. And I think most of us did that at the beginning. Either we've all realised we've put on 3 stone and realised that's not a sustainable way of managing. But also, I think just generally, people's energy for that has died down. So the things that I'm going to suggest are not sort of cooking and things that I'm hoping that you've already exhausted. There's just some new ideas. Okay. So obviously, I've worked with children with all forms of dystrophy and atrophy for over 30 years. And it's a bit like when you say you meet somebody with autism, you've met one child with autism. When you've met one child with dystrophy, I've met one child. They're all different. And, I've had a family and we had 4 brothers, all with dystrophy. And they were all different and their paths were all very different. So I've tried to make this evening as a sort of midline in terms of age range. But I'm very aware that some of your students may also have additional learning needs, sort of autism or other learning needs. And I'm equally aware that some of you might have some real academic high flyers. So it's about trying to make sure, as you ask questions, that we capture the children that we are representing this evening. So we'll start with suggestions, and then I can go up and I can go down. Okay, so I did give this some thought, and I thought, okay, we've been in this extended lockdown. Some of us have been trying to do things that school sent home. Some of us have been overdoing those. Some of us have just completely given up and just thought, I've got to survive. You can have Frozen on and your Lego, and that's just going to be how we're going to live. So, but obviously I'm aware that if we continue where we're at, that our young students are eventually going to go back to school. When that is, and the timeline for that may be different for different students, but certainly in terms of some of the students I'm supporting, the information is around preparing to go back in the autumn term. So I suddenly thought, right, what would I do if I had 5 weeks left? We've abandoned the cooking, the sourdough, and we want them away from a screen. What would I do? Okay, so this is really what I would want students to do. And just before all of you joined, I was talking to Lynette and Sam, and I was saying that quite often when I meet with parents of dystrophy children, I'm always talking about when they're a bit older. Always, whether I'm talking to a parent of a 4-year-old or a parent of a 16-year-old, because quite often a lot of my students present quite young and can present quite just very, very protected, and for good reasons, but very, very protected. And a lot of what I do, I often meet with the siblings, especially in the early days, and we talk individually. And often parents will say, the brother and sister, or, they're very upset, or this is an issue, or there's a huge issue around behaviour within the home. But when you slowly unpick it all, quite often when I talk to the siblings, it's around fairness within the home. I would say out of everything I unpick, that's the most common thing I hear. And I say, well, why don't you say something to mum or dad? And they said, oh, I can't. They've got enough on their plate. But quite often they'll be like, well, I get asked to do the dishwasher and feed the dog and do this. And meanwhile, I'm going to call my child Simon tonight. Simon is chilling with Netflix and he's got his iPad, and he's not doing anything. So it was just something to float with you all in the mix about how much does your student with dystrophy do, as in terms of life skills within the family. I fully appreciate that it can't be accessed in the same way. But certainly in terms of roles and jobs, I often speak with young people who are 16, 17, and they find when they go to college, the whole thinking for themselves quite difficult, because quite a lot of things have been enabled for them. Things have been brought to them, things have been facilitated, which we all do. When we have a student who's struggling, you facilitate, you set things up and you bring things and you but I would say it's around thinking about a role within the family for your child. What role do they have? Even it's around sorting socks into 2 different baskets, flicking them off their tray, whatever. They need a role, and when somebody else is being asked to do something, they need to do something. And that's just my own opinion, but I have worked with students for a very long time. And I do see quite often when I'm in schools, I have got the most amazing young person I used to work with. He used to just go, "Oi, over here," which didn't go down well with his teacher or his TA. While he could still click, he used to flick his fingers and expect people to. And that's a natural thing to have happened when people have brought, facilitated, and helped. So the first thing I would ask you to think about is the role within your family life. What does your child do that's a fair thing? It doesn't have to be the same. It can obviously be accessed differently, but what role do they have every day when everybody else is putting the cups away? Or my experience of most families is that in the end, just to survive, quite often none of the children do much, but mum or dad runs ragged just because they don't want to fight and they are exhausted. But that tends to be some of the things when you're unpicking with older siblings about children saying, but that's unfair. Very rarely do older siblings say about it being unfair about the disability their brother or sister's got, but more around how the family works. You know, mum's really tired. You know, mum's got no energy for me. So it's around family life. In the PowerPoint that I've sent, there are all links to some of the things I've been talking about. So just if you want to know, or you've got feral children like I have, and you think, well, actually, what should 12-year-olds be doing and what should 17-year-olds really be doing, there's just a few links to take you to some basic life skills that they should be able to do. But really, you know, students should be able to make themselves a sandwich, salt washing, those sort of basic type tasks. And I think it's important for our child with disability to have an active role in some of those things.
Before you move on, Claire, does anybody have any kind of hints and tips of their own that they use at this kind of stage, you know, to kind of include their kids? I know that Marion, when we had the Marion Main physiotherapy webinars, Claire, that we had a couple of weeks ago, she was talking about these kind of things can be classed as exercise as well. So it's, you know, really good to keep active and physio kind of stuff as well. So not just psychologically, it's all intertwined.
Yeah, I mean it's movement, and any movement of any sort is useful movement really. And I think certainly talking to lots of my families that, you know, people have got into a routine, which is completely understandable, and there's nothing wrong with that, just to survive. But it's around just beginning to build in some structure, maybe with some new things that they've not been used to doing, because otherwise the step back into school is going to become such a massive shock for some of the students. Really interesting, one of the things that when I've talked to young adults, they often would have no idea how to get help, how to deal with an emergency. So say, you know, you were running in the room and you fell, what would they do? What would they do? Where would they go? It's about thinking through, if you and they were the people in the garden and you tripped over or you cut your head open, what would they do? And it's beginning to think through, even with young students, who would you go to? What would you do? And I think because we are so used to being caregivers for some of our students, we don't assume that they will ever be in that role where they could be taking some responsibility or getting help. I have 2 amazing young men with dystrophy, and I mentioned money to one of the parents in one of the annual reviews when the student was about 9, and they did the normal, naming the coins and working out. None of that worked. He was not remotely interested until we worked out that if we gave him £20 to spend on Amazon, he could bring up price comparison websites. He could tell us when that was a better deal in terms of postage. And it's about beginning to build some of these life skills. So you could say that's maths. I personally wouldn't want anybody be doing maths homework during the summer holidays, but it's about, or even saying, well, actually we're thinking of going somewhere for the day, if you're brave enough to be going somewhere, but get them to look it up on the website, begin to budget, and begin to think through what's that going to cost you as a family, if your students your children are capable of doing that. Obviously, simple cooking. I promise to stay away from the sourdough, but and it's also around what's been really interesting all my career. When we have any child in a wheelchair of any sort, that it's different if they've got an electric chair and they drive themselves around sort of school environments. They're generally very capable. But really interestingly, once they get in the car, they take no notice about where they're going. And if you get bored and it's a rainy day and you can get them in the car, I would do a magical mystery tour to somewhere. But you're not driving anywhere until they give you the instructions, because it is really interesting how little anybody who's in a wheelchair takes notice of their pathway to anywhere. So I don't know if that's if other people find that, but
have you tried that before, Sam? That's amazing.
Do you know what? I was smiling profusely at the managing money, because I used to, I don't do it anymore because he's got far too good at it. I used to play this game with Jude, and it was, if you can count it, you can keep it. He just got too good. He got too good, and I was too poor. But it was just a really nice way. I used to just empty it out and count all the coins up, and then put them into little piles and bits and pieces and that something. But navigating, do you know what? Jude sometimes he's definitely better than me with directions, because I'm useless, and he's got a really, really good memory. So I might try that.
Get him to take control. So say we're going to somebody like nannies, but you're not going anywhere until he tells you.
I'm going to try it.
I have done this with a couple of families, and they didn't leave their drive for about an hour because there was quite a row whether it was left or right, and nobody could agree on left or right. But if it's a rainy day and you just want to get out, I just love the comment. You obviously know Jude really well then.
Yeah.
Okay, Lynette, can we flip to the next one?
I'm going to do that, actually.
I am.
Let's give it a go.
I think it's really interesting, actually, and also teamwork. That'll be, I've got 3 children.
They can all take a pathway.
Yeah, and what's quite interesting as well, because I think lots of families that we've been talking to, and Sam's spoken to 1,500 Duchenne families over the last 4 months, and lots of them have felt really overwhelmed by, certainly, the Facebook feeds of, people having these wonderful activities, and oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, with that, and that's actually really hard to get organised, especially if you're managing work and also managing obviously the physical needs for somebody. Let alone if you've got multiple children, different ages, etc., which lots of our families do. So having something like this, which is something that you can just get in the car, everyone knows driving the car is relaxing.
Actually, it's something everybody can do as well. It's something that all the kids can do.
Yeah.
I think they can take turns, which is amazing.
I think I really frustrate people when I talk to different parents groups, because I quite often say, well, why do we need to do something different? And they get really cross with me and say, well, my child has all these needs. And I say, I know. But actually, they're just one child within 3 or 4 within a family. And why are we not looking for things we can do as a family? I fully appreciate you all need time away from each other, but you must have worked that out during COVID about how you either give them screen time or you put a movie on or something like that. I was trying to sort of think about ideas of bringing you together. When you do have an hour together, you're not going to want 3 different money activities or 3 different geography activities. You might as well go in the car and play Let's Go on a Magical Mystery Tour. I am not going to be responsible for any crashes.
I was going to say, we've got a disclaimer here.
Trips to sort of Birmingham. because you haven't been able to go left or right.
Running out of petrol.
Yeah, but
That's
it's
a
just an
brilliant
idea. It's just an idea. And it's about control. Lots of my students try and control. Sam asked me to cover behaviour, which I'm going to cover a little bit later on, but people try and gain control, and that's where you get the behaviour, because they don't have control over lots of the care things, lots of the therapy things they need to do. But a lot of what I'm trying to suggest are about control, but control that's within a family life and boundaries, not so that you're not seeking that control by dictating, I watch that film again and again and again, or I'm only playing with that particular thing on that particular space in the house. And that's where you normally begin to see that pull for control, is if they're not fully involved in lots of these decisions and family life. And we think we do, but often we make choices that are, do you want that or that? Because it's quick. Do you want this or this? And it's about just thinking about things that should happen for or everybody within the house, not just the child with disability. Okay, so I fully expect that, you know, you coming to your child tonight or tomorrow morning and going, I've heard this teacher who said you should be doing jobs. I can imagine the glee in your voice, and I can imagine really how that will go down well. It's not going to go down well. But basically, I'm assuming you've all got a phone or access. You've obviously all online now. But just download, there's free spinners, there's a great fidget spinner thing where you can spin it and put what you want in the things, and there's this amazing app that's free, spinning the name select, you put everybody's name in the household, including dogs if they need a walk, and then you can put jobs or on roles, and then you can spin it. So it just makes the young person with a disability have an equal status to the adults and the siblings in this. And actually most people quite like that. They feel it's fair. You setting up a rota on a blackboard in the kitchen's probably not going to cut it, because it's going to be that moment in time where they suddenly need to go to the toilet that will then take an hour out of your day. But then the washing up to be put away never happens because, you know. So use technology, ladies and gentlemen. Also, as a practitioner, I don't like timers. So when I go into, I've got 107 schools, so I go into lots of classrooms, and you see lots of teachers who suddenly have a tick tock. It makes my heart race. So I think I don't naturally like timers, but the reality is, if you need, I'm just using Lego as an example, the Lego cleared away because you're on the table and nobody can eat unless the Lego is cleared away, then a timer is probably going to be your friend. So again, you can look at sort of like the timers that are in the middle, that are actually quite nice from a sensory point of view. And that's a physical thing that you can say, well, actually, I'm going to go away, I'm going to start the dinner, but actually you need to have cleared your tray or whatever by the time I come back. Some of the autism type timers are, I find, probably clearer for a child who likes a row over why they're not doing something, or likes more of a cueing into where they need to be. So if you look at the one that's green, yellow and red, you can program in whether that's for a minute or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But also quite a lot of our students can become and have become quite demanding of being quite impatient during this period, because, as I said at the beginning, I think everybody's tolerance for this situation is waning. And actually, you know, we're all in the situation of just giving them something because you need to do something else. But I think if we're thinking about beginning to prepare them for going back to school and beginning to have to be within 29, 30 other students and waiting and needing their needs to be one of 30 instead of one of within a home, I would be looking at doing something that's either a countdown or a timer so that they can begin to have some sense of where they are. The green, yellow and red one is really nice. You can do it on your phone. They can have it on an iPad. It's all free. And then if you want to be a really torturous parent, I'm just saying you may want to bank this idea. I'm not saying you need to do it. I'm sure you're all lovely. But if you go on YouTube and type in Mission Impossible, it's the music from Mission Impossible, and it sort of do 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 do, and there's a big clock. So if your normal strategies of getting somebody to do something within a certain time aren't working, most young people, especially boys, love the whole Mission Impossible countdown.
Or you could just do the countdown.
You can sing, Lynette. You see, I've got no musical talent whatsoever.
I think I'm going to have to Google the countdown theme.
Yes, and they do have the countdown. Yeah, they have all of that. So just, use what's there. Don't reinvent the wheel. But you're going to probably shock quite a few of your children, because I think, well, how do they know about that? Where did that come from? Just have basically a toolkit behind you. On a bad day, have a toolkit. I say that to all teachers, have a toolkit. On a good day, you don't need them. On a bad day, it's useful.
Do you have like a kind of, would you suggest like a whiteboard? Because what I struggle with is I go, oh, this is really good, and then I forget. So would you have it on a whiteboard or a notebook, or
what, your day?
So a practical, to have all of your arsenal of all these ideas in like a book or something. I know it's a tiny thing, but it's just.
Personally, I would have it on my phone. Most of this we can put on a phone. So even if because you need something that's transferable to the bathroom, you've got somebody hoisted midair, and you still need something that's portable. So I would probably have it on my phone, iPad, tablet, Kindle, whatever. I would have something that was portable, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation in the middle of a park, if you've been brave enough to get to the park, and then you don't have your toolkit with you. So personally, I would have it at least on the phone. There's nothing wrong with having a whiteboard, but I think most of us would have a phone with us wherever we went nowadays. That would just be how I would work. And also, I think most kids are quite intrigued by technology, so it's easier to get their attention with something on the phone than maybe depends. If they're young, maybe the whiteboard, but most of my older students would just glance at it and just be like, okay, I'm back to what I'm doing.
And as you say, carrying a whiteboard round a park.
Yeah, I've carried quite a lot in my time. I've scaled things down. Now technology's caught me up. It's been useful. And all these are free, so don't. Okay, so my first point was about establishing a role in family life. My second point is things that make the whole family, including the child with dystrophy, think and memory. Even when we have a normal 6 weeks, you go back on the first day, and first 2 or 3 days, I am doing training across my borough, whole school, big training. And I am talking to a load of zombies, because they've gone mad for 6 weeks and nobody's thought of anything. And the whole ability to cue back in and work and process quickly. And that's with people who have taught for years, and they know what's coming. They know the 2nd of September is coming, and they have done nothing to prepare themselves. And you see, over a couple of days, the audience warm up. And children are no different. Quite often people say, oh, we've had a holiday and they've gone back so much. Well, obviously during this time, we haven't just had the holiday. We've had 16, 18 weeks of shielding on top. So my next recommendation would be, I don't know the ages of all your children. We can talk through the questions with that, but it's about what makes them think. So have a tray, put 3 items on, cover it with a tea towel, hide something, what's missing. Everybody can play that while you're having your dinner. It's about things like playing pairs. You move. One of my families has a Pokemon cushion, and they move it every day to a different spot. And it's become more and more bizarre. It was in the middle of the pasta the other day. But everybody has to keep their eyes open to remember where it was and where it is the next day. Things like the shopping game, I'm going shopping and I'm going to buy this, this and this. If you've got a child that's able to talk, obviously they can order it. If you've got a child that's not speaking, just have the symbols and just the memory type things that you'd need. Games like Who's Who, things like bingo, There's really lovely jigsaw apps now. So even if children have got very restricted movement, you can do it on an iPad and do simple jigsaws. There's a great jigsaw app where you can do your own photo. So you take the photo on the iPad or tablet, and then you can divide it up into 6 pieces, 10, 20, and then you need the tiniest movement to do the jigsaw. Most people quite like doing a jigsaw of themselves till you've become a mum and had a family, and then nobody really wants to look at your face, and most people would do Johnny Depp or somebody else. But things like Magic Cup, have your 3 cup and a pom-pom and you move it. And the other thing, I've put some links in the notes in the PowerPoint about things called Lego therapy. A lot of my young men love Lego. And if you Google Lego therapy, you can go on a course. You don't need to go on a course. Just Google it, watch it on YouTube. And I've done 2 links to a great practitioner in St. Piers, and she's just showing you how it's done. And yes, our students might like to play Lego and they might like to build, but this is about following an instruction. Pick this red one up, put that there, do this. Because whenever they go back to school, whatever that day is, somebody is going to be telling them what to do all day long. And this isn't going to go well if we don't start some more direct. But I don't want your home for the next 5 weeks to be a pretend classroom, but we have to start things that involve memory, thinking, problem solving. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or you think I'm just too weird, but that's what I see children come back to without SEN after 6 weeks normally. So what we're going to have coming through the door in September after such a long period away. So most of my students, I'm just being honest, I've just had a chat to Jude before we came online, are thriving. They love lockdown. They absolutely love it. Jude doesn't want to go back to school. He's absolutely loving being at home with Sam. But ultimately, at some point, because Sam will be arrested, he is going to have to go to school unless she chooses to homeschool him. And people are going to have to get the measure of our students, all our students, even without SEN, because we've all had a different journey through this. So if you have 5 minutes every day, 10 minutes every day, begin to be thinking about memory thinking. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think it's brilliant, actually. I've written so many notes. I always do this, but I'm going to try the tray. Okay. I'm going to do the tray with all the different objects on and take one away and see. I really liked that. I haven't done that with him before, but I'm going to give that one a try and see.
You know what, Sam? We discovered, because I think there's something, I don't know what you'll probably be able to tell me this, Claire, but I remember reading once somewhere, hearing from someone, that often young people with Duchenne have amazing certain type of memory.
Yeah.
And in order to kind of make that, kind of to almost exploit that, that's a really good game for that. And actually we did it with Samson, and he just smashed the floor with it. Same with pairs, like matching pairs, literally.
But that's what I want to hear, Lynette. I've got a video at the end that I'd like to share with you. If we run out of time, you can watch it. But it's a lady talking about her son with Fragile X, and she's saying we all are sort of conditioned to think, okay, our child has a diagnosis, and this is going to limit them. But actually what I need is our students, and Sam knows me well, is they need to smash it in the family. They need to be better than their brother and sister at some of these things. And we need for things not to define them, because they all have often quite a very spiky profile. But, working memory is something that often they're very, very good at. I think Sam, I'm just being honest, Jude will thrash you because he's very, very observant. He doesn't miss a trick. I'm just saying. So you might want to practice, maybe. I'm
going to do a lot of practice
while he's in bed.
Don't put money on it, Sam. To be honest.
No money.
No.
But memory and following instructions and processing, if we don't use that, or we do the similar activities every day, then we are not developing those pathways again, and they will have shut down. And that's just the same for, people like myself. I was giddy last week. I was like, no more 16-hour days. But actually, I found it quite difficult to settle to anything for a couple of days, because I'd been so used to people on Zoom, phone, text, calls. I just needed a couple of days, but I know that when I go back, the first few days I'll be very tired because I've not been used to that sensory demand. And our students are going to find the same when they go back to school, and they've not been used to that sensory demands on them. So that would just be an idea. Random, I appreciate. Okay, so we've done role in the home. We've done we need memory and thinking, and the next thing that's massively important to me is creativity. And I'm sure you've exhausted everything that you've possibly got in the cupboard that involves glue, paint, or anything like that. I've just tried to give two ends of the spectrum. I don't know, I've just seen a very beautiful little girl sat on Lynette's lap earlier, and I don't know if she's got this book called You Choose. This is the book that if I lecture at university for newly qualified teachers, both primary and secondary, and I tell every teacher, if you don't buy any other book, buy You Choose. And there's now You Choose Space, they've upgraded, but basically it's a book for those of you who don't know, and it says, who are you going to be today? And it is every sort of person, character, cowboy, princess, robot, alien. And then you choose the house, then you choose the bed, then you choose the food that they're going to have. And it's just the most, you can read it 1,000,000 times, and it's something you can read individually and something you can read as a family, because every time you read it you have a completely different scenario. But actually it's so interesting, the conversations that come out around what they choose and why they choose. So You Choose, the red and yellow one is the original one. Highly recommend that. They now do other versions, so space dinosaurs. I've given you an example of some online colouring in type things. I, as a teacher, never did go away and draw a picture, go away and colour in. As a person, I'd quite like that. I was the sort of young lady at school who quite liked the drawing and colouring, but for most students, it's tedious. And actually, a lot of my students with any sort of dystrophy or atrophy struggle with how precise things are. But there's a great range of free apps, right from young ones right up to adults, that are online colouring in. And you can choose your picture and you drop colours in, and you can end up making great cards for birthdays. That's quite useful. For the more teenage kids, I've got quite a few of my teenage young men into DJing. And you can DJ on a phone or an iPad, and you can mix music. I have to be honest, I would strongly recommend a pair of headphones along with the app, because it will dement you. But things like DJing, writing a song, playing, write a jingle for the family, and then that becomes a jingle for the phone, answer phone, that becomes your new, it's about how can they have a really strong role within your family that's creative. And for me, it's something I think every child is creative. For me, it's very definitely, I love music, but I can't produce anything that's remotely melodic. So for me, it would be art. But I wouldn't have known that until I tried. And I think it's the same for all our students. I am using quite a lot of IT, but I do it from an access point of view, because it's quite easy, whether they're in bed or in the chair or whenever. And also most of our kids will just take to it, like, you'll struggle, but the kids will just learn it very quickly.
And do you know what, Claire? I think what's resonated really strongly for me in this last bit is actually when they do something like this, using it. So what you said about, about doing the DJing,
yeah,
to actually use it, that make that the wonderful feeling that would make for any of them.
The purpose, the real purpose. Yeah. So I think sometimes we do things for the sake of doing it, and it's almost like, well, that's killed that hour or 2 hours, and you might say, oh, that's lovely, but there's no end result, and there's no, so I think it's very important to have a reason. Like the YouTube, you could do it, you choose book, it can be any sort of book, but you could do that, then you could record it, and then maybe send that video to a younger cousin, and that's their bedtime story, and then get feedback back. I think it's just really important that we have a role in life. I know it's a bit of a mantra for me, but it's important. Okay, so when I'm working with students, any student with any SEN, obviously I'm aware of the curriculum, I'm aware of what everybody should be learning. My background's quite unusual for this type of teacher, in that my background's science and neurology. So most teachers in my world are sort of English and humanities. So I'm a bit weird before I start. And most people want to write a story or have a very strong linguistical task. And for many of my students, they are linguistically strong, but when they're tired, it's one of the last things they want to do. And often, you know, I am using the exception of Jude, because normally I'd go for an hour visit and couldn't get out for 2, because I'd say, is there anything you want to talk to me about? And I'd have like 80 pages of notes, which he used to keep in an analogic, you know, a list for me. I think Jude's probably the exception, but most of my young men, as they get older, tend to get quieter within the school environment, and they tend to become more self-contained, almost quite reserved, unless they know you well. So if I had a young man or a young lady with dystrophy I was at home with, I would think, okay, I'm not actually interested with what work's been sat by the teacher. You know, I'm not interested really. I'm interested in what's their biggest passion, whether that be dinosaurs, football, whatever. What's their passion, and what do they know about that subject? Once once we've got that, then we have to work out, well, what we're going to do with that knowledge. So, you know, that's all very well, but there's no point doing any sort of activity with a young person if you don't have an audience. There's not much point doing 1,000 facts about something if you don't know what you're going to do. I've just seen somebody come to say goodnight to Lynette, I think.
That was Samson. He came in and said he's bored. Well,
there's a few ideas now. Hopefully you should be all right tomorrow, Lynette. So it's start with their passion, work out what you're going to do, think of a role, and then anything you do on a project of any sort needs to be little and often. There's no point thinking, oh, I've got an hour on Friday, right, I'm going to sit down and we're going to crack this. Well, there's no point, but you're not going to have the same thing. 10 minutes every day is going to have much more effect. And then it's a purpose to celebrate and share. So, Lynette, if you could flick me over to the next slide, I'll give you an example about what we will do. So if you've got a younger student, this app's amazing. It's called Our Story. It's free. And you can take photos, whether you go to the park or photos within your home or whatever you do. And then once you've got home, or if you're at home, it's an activity within the household, you can drag them and it makes like a movie reel. So you can have a movie reel that you can sequence your day, or you can sequence a week. You can make a pretend story with you dressing up. You can choose, if you don't want to do the writing, you can choose just to record your story by speaking. Equally, you can type, or if you're a young person that likes to draw, you can draw. But what you end up with is you end up with a story. So it could be a completely fictional story. It could be your day. So, you know, if maybe, you know, you've got grandma that lives away or dad that doesn't live with you, you can have an active diary that you keep, and then you email them their whole story, but it's got the young person's voice and they can control. Now, actually, if I was a teacher, I would be saying, well, that's story writing for that day. And I've kept a diary. You know, if you did that one day a week for 5 weeks, you as a mum or a dad will have an amazing COVID diary of the last 5 weeks. And actually, you don't even need to go anywhere. You can get the other people involved in the house. You could all dress up. You could all have different characters. But it's very, very easy. And in the notes, I've put a link to my website, which has my technician just explaining how you do it. It's very easy. And it's free. So for me, that ticks the English box in terms of literacy. Okay, so if they don't want to do that, because that looks too much like schoolwork, I would be, okay, as a family, our young person with dystrophy, now they may have an encyclopedic knowledge on dinosaurs or football or something. And then in this day and age of Zoom, you need to pull together, beg friends and family, and get them to create a quiz. So if they're finding out the pictures, they're finding out the answers, they can host the quiz, or you can host it with them. But actually, I've given you 2 links. One's a free website where you just drop them in. Another one is how to do it in PowerPoint, a bit like I'm doing here. And I think for you, that's a real purpose. That's research, that's reading, that's cutting pictures, dropping it in. And as far as I'm concerned, that's sort of IT covered. I don't know.
It's such a good idea.
I mean, there's a whole
Disney.
Zoom quiz thing. Yeah, Disney. I've just put Disney up there, but you know, and actually, how wonderful would it be for our young people to know more than other people on certain subjects? I just think that's amazing. So
I'm thinking
you know,
Star Wars, Lego.
Star Wars, Lego,
Marvel.
yeah. I'm just, and for me, these are thinking, processing, learning skills. These are all skills that if they go back to school, they'll know how to do a PowerPoint, or they'll know how to drop something in, or there's a reason for it, but it isn't school. So I'm working on skills behind learning rather than learning and then having to work out how you're going to make them do it.
I guess they can also work with siblings, can't they, on this?
Yeah.
To do it.
Beware, mums and dads, you're going to probably have a massive challenge on Sunday. It'll be a Star Wars quiz.
Nanas and granddads.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But the whole Zoom quiz thing is a real thing during COVID, and that's just something that people have learned how to do. So why not use that? Okay, and then the next thing I've suggested is, in terms of my young people generally, I have some all my students are delightful, but I would say a fairly common thing that pops up is around from the age of about 9, when I think some of my students find they can do less and need more help to do more, is that they want the world to come to them. And they need the world to come to them because otherwise they can't do anything. But I think one of the things that they find quite difficult, particularly if they've got a TA and they're used to an adult beside them, is around playing a game, and playing a game on a level playing field. So I think we've all had the game. I was actually, just before I joined you, I was listening to Sarah Cox on BBC Two, and she was saying that she made her family come away from screens to play Cluedo, but she'd put two people in and no weapon and the wrong room, so they spent an hour and the board got thrown in a heap and it was a complete disaster. So I think we've all probably been there. But I would look at it more from the point of view of our young people and their brothers and sisters, of creating a game and then you playing it, rather than a bespoke game that you've probably exhausted. So again, in the notes, I've given you a couple of links to really easy games that you can download and you can do online as well.
Claire, we can't actually see the links because I've shared the main screen, but what I'll do is I'll copy the links, and in the follow-up email I send through to everybody, I'll pop the links in there. So
yeah, I mean, if you just Google board game maker, you'll come up with, but I've tried to find some that are quite simple for you, because the last thing you all need to be is up at midnight trying to work out how to download a PDF and flip it and turn it. These are quite easy to do. Okay, so I've nagged about family life, I've nagged about memory and thinking, I've talked about time together and how I would, some ideas about what you would do. And probably, I think because I work with a lot of older students as well as younger, I would want a method of communication to be key. I think for any type of learning or just survival within a family, the communication is key. And we're all busy, and we all can start with going, oh yeah, but just a minute, I've just got to. We all do that. but it's around building in ways of developing vocabulary. And certainly most of us have stayed comfortable and stayed within things that we know, because that's made life bearable and we've got through how far we've come. However, I think in terms of going back to school, we have to start beginning to think about new things out of the realm of what you'd have experienced at home, new words, new vocabulary. If you've got young children, I would start with something called a semantic web, which is on your bottom right hand corner. And that's just something that I would just choose a word for the week. So it could be football. And then every day we've got to think of other words that come out of that. And you add, so you have a piece of paper on the wall and you can do it with post-it notes. And it's a way of expanding vocabulary. One of the biggest barriers to learning is vocabulary or lack of vocabulary. Now, if you have students that are non-verbal, you can still do it with symbols, and you can introduce different symbols and pictures. If you have students that are older, who are in secondary school, then you need to be thinking, Google what's coming up in September in terms of a book, whether that's, David Copperfield or, and maybe watch the film to start off with together as a family, and then begin to pick out words. As you're in the film, pick out words so that when they are going back to school, it's not come out of nowhere. So if you have a year 4 child, they always do Romans in year 4, just have a bit of a Google about what's coming up next year. Everybody in England teaches everything at the same time now, and just begin to not teach, but just begin to build some words, Romans, castles, and slowly build that up. And that will be unique for all of you. A lot of my families, I suggest having a word wall, and you start with a word like ball, and everybody gets a post-it note every dinner time, and they've got to then build however high. So some of my families, it goes up the stairs and into the bedroom, because you can then do ball, bat, woods, dark, and you then carry on. But vocabulary is one of the biggest barriers to children doing well in later life. I would use films. I'm sure you all have survived on Disney Channel and Netflix and Amazon Prime. But the next time you watch a film, or they're watching a film and you're not there, have 20 questions afterwards. So they may have watched the film 100 times, but you can say not the plot of the thing, but it's around, did you notice this or did you notice that? Equally, if you've got an older sibling, they can do the questions for you. So it doesn't have to be you. It can be, and actually, if you've got really good friends and family, it might be that they could do that for you and prepare a set of questions, or maybe you could swap as a group. But it's about apart from just enjoying the film for film's sake, it's that beginning to do the thinking and pulling it apart. There's things like categories, so you can do a whole range of things for lunch. So you can get everything out for lunch, and then you can have children who sort them into categories. Again, that's a good way of developing vocabulary and understanding how groups happen. If you are brave enough to go out, and I'm just beginning to do, as a shielding family, just beginning to do my first steps, I would actively get them involved about where they want to go. So get them to do the research, get them to look it up. And actually quite a lot of places have virtual tours now, so you can preempt what it's going to look like when you go in. So my daughter's been shielding the same time as your children, but she went for her first trip out to Colchester Zoo on Sunday with her boyfriend, and I was like, she's very capable, and but because she can't see very well as well, it's an added thing that obviously she would normally but she watched she said, "Oh no, Mum, I've watched the virtual tour online. I know where you go in, and I know it's a one-way system, and I know this is what you do." And actually lots and lots of places have these virtual tours now. The other thing is, if you talk to your schools before they go back to school, lots of the schools have filmed these for our students. So it says, this is the gate you now come in, and this is where you're going to be met, and this is what it looks like now. So it may be that if schools haven't suggested that to you, that they can send you the video just to begin to prime, you know. But I would definitely do it for days out or trips out. If you're not going out, but also we need to begin to share with our children what the world's like outside. So the next time one of you do venture out to Sainsbury's or wherever, I would try and video a little bit just about the entrance and the sanitizer and how you go, because we can come home, and I think most of our families haven't spoke very much about it, or we've just had shielded delivery, so they've generally got no idea about the changes in the world that's outside. So again, that's something that a friend or family could do for you and then share. The other thing, that if you've got students, children that are able to write and type on a basic level, I would, if they haven't got one, create an email address. I don't like typing programs. I don't like keyboard programs. They're boring. Nobody wants to do them, and the dropout rate's insane. But if you get, you know, a couple of cousins and a grandma or an auntie to send an email every day, even if they're just sending rude jokes back to each other or video clips of each other, but it's the whole, you know, hello nanny, here's this rude joke, or here's me being stupid, or whatever. It's learning all those skills, and it's keeping you connected with the world. So I don't think you're too young to have an email account if you're able to do that. And then just use Zoom. Use Zoom. I know we use Zoom, but get the children to use Zoom. But that's all those things are communication and language, and they're very important about preparing them for the other side of the summer. I didn't really cover some, Jude, about what we do when we talk too much, because I just love Jude. But I would always tell him that I was going for half the time longer than I had, because I knew that if I said I was there for half an hour, I needed to allow an hour. So, you know. And some of my teenage boys that are just too cool for school, if they pass me in the corridor, there's just like this small, like, all right, miss. There's sort of like a nod. And now I rang a couple of mine the other day, and the dad knew I was ringing, but he'd gone to the loo and he'd left his phone on one of the young men's trays, and he's year 9, so sort of 13, 14. And he picked up and he's like, hello? And I was like, hi. And he's like, oh, miss, I'm playing PSP. And I was like, I'm not the PSP police. You can play PSP. I haven't got a problem with PSP. But he generally thought I was phoning to check him up, because he's only known me in one world, really. So, yeah, just talking, you know, it's quite useful, because he said, and his dad said, and his brother, both boys have got dystrophy. When I first started the conversation, everything was fine. Yeah, it's fine. And I carried on talking a little bit more, and 40 minutes later, I had about 10 things that I needed to help them with. So it's beyond the first 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. There's so much to think about there. Shall I move on, Claire?
Yeah, do you mind? Okay, so once we've looked at a few things to do, I was thinking, obviously, I'm sure, knowing many families that I work with, this is your priority and has been your priority all the way along. I think probably, you know, certainly talking to the students that I've spoke to and the ones that I've caught up with, which are numerous, they are having a good time. They are having a fantastic time during lockdown. It's the parents who are exhausted, because everybody's given everything to keep everything on an even keel. And I think parents have done the most amazing job, particularly parents that have been shielding, because you have less options that you have to your hand. But I think just in terms of where we're going in the next 5 weeks, I would begin to think about where they need to end up in September. And one is a sleep pattern that is not going to come to a massive culture shock when they need to get up for the bus or to go in the car. I am holding my hands up of a young person that does not get up till midday. So she's going to have the equal challenge. I think nutrition, about eating well and being resilient, because they've been shielding and they've been being safe. And we've all eaten stuff that has just made us happy. But in theory, we're going back into a much bigger world, and we're going to be mixing with people, and there's the normal bugs and germs, let alone COVID. So just keeping an eye on what they're eating and about immune system and getting prepared, because every October, every child has a cough or a cold generally without being removed from the world. And just being outside. And I'm really nagging the teenage young people. Most of my teenage young men don't really want to go outside, would much rather be inside. But I think just having some daylight, vitamin D, is useful if you can facilitate that. I know not everybody can, but I also think that when you then move to transition back to school, the shock isn't so huge if you've just gone round the block, or you've been in the garden. The other thing is I have noticed quite a strong pattern of connection with friends from school and peers has dropped off for most students, because most of them have said, but I've got nothing to say because I've done nothing different, or I've got nothing new. It's the same as last week. And that generally is, unless it's facilitated for younger children with mums and dads setting it up, I have to be honest that once you get to sort of teenage years and they're facilitating it, it is really dropping off. So just bear that in mind, that begin to try and make some connections with people that will be in their class, even just see if they can have a telephone call or a Zoom call, because for students without SEN, it has significantly dropped off. So just, I don't know if you knew that's a bit of a national picture. And the next thing, I put it in a slightly different colour, is about change and challenge.
Claire, I'm sorry, about the connection with peers, is that for everybody?
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, massively. I think if you've got younger children, then sometimes that has carried on because mums have wanted to connect and kids have come on the screen or whatever. But once you get past about 10, where they're beginning to make the interactions themselves, and we've got loads of young people where sporting things have opened back up and they're safe and they're not choosing to go back. And there's a real national picture about this at the moment.
Are they not choosing to go back because of the fear of the of COVID, or is it because they can't be bothered? I don't want to say that, but that's probably what my tween would say.
I think it's a mix. I think mainly for the teenage young men is they've become nocturnal. So they stay up till 1 or 2 playing online. They don't get up till lunchtime. They're not really awake and with it till sort of about 5. And sometimes the day's gone or the event's gone. Whereas when they were at school, they were up and would have just carried on naturally. Certainly when I'm talking to people, they're all saying, oh, I'll do it in September, but at the moment I can't be bothered. Now, I can't be bothered could be a bigger anxiety that we're not digging deep. But certainly a lot of the students, some people have gone back and they've gone back to football or trampolining or whatever. But again, there has not been the uptake for the older students that we expected, not anywhere near. So if you've got older siblings in the house, just bear in mind that that's a global thing, whether you've got SEN or not.
That's not only interesting, but also kind of reassuring to know.
Yeah, completely. But just to bear in mind, just begin to throw a little bit of change and challenge in, however you may want to rock your day. So if you could just pop it onto the next slide, Lynette, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so this is probably going to be a little bit controversial, but I certainly have not rocked the boat. So if the dishwasher, which is Alex's only job, isn't done, I've stomped and moaned to my husband about why hasn't she done the dishwasher? But, you know, certainly during the middle of COVID, I've just thought, let it go. And actually, you know, she might do it at 10 o'clock at night or whenever, but it's piled up on the side. And I've just decided to pick my battles. And I'm assuming that most of you have probably done the same. You've picked your battles. And that's made life as comfortable as it can be. And it's made life as harmonious as it can be. However, our young people are going back into school where suddenly they will have very little control. They will be told where to be, what to do, how to think, and how to respond. And I think it's going to be a challenge for all people, all students, not just students with a disability. So if you've got a younger child or you've got younger children within the home, I would begin to start with 1 day a week, sit as a family and work out what you're going to do that day. Maybe choose a weekend and maybe work out, right, are we doing this, what we're going to have for breakfast? And you have like a visual, you can just do little cartoons and a visual timetable of the day. And people can have a say. But what you really need to throw into that day is an activity where everybody gets to choose. So you may get to choose, you know, each family member gets to choose. Then you need activities that are required. So for your children, it will be therapy, you know, personal care, whatever they need to have done. Then some time together as a family, whether that be, you know, a quick game of Kim's game or whatever. And then time alone. So it could be that everybody disappears to their room and everybody's watching a separate DVD. And I'm putting screen or PSP or Xbox because that's part of life. And it's about beginning to structure a day to decide we're all up and we're going to do this and this is what we're going to do. So there's times where you're together as a family, times where you're asking your child to do something on their own, whether that be for 2 seconds, if that's the sort of child they are, or an hour, and then follow it, because actually that's the beginning of a timetable and what life will be like when they go back to school. But I've been a bit kind in there's lots of choice and lots of things that they'd want to do. I'm hearing from lots of families the whole joy of being together, whether that's been for a game or anything, is not there anymore. So if you say, let's all go for a walk or let's all play a game, the response is quite poor, I'm hearing, in most families. So I think also to have a wish list, because it could be that you've got 10 suggestions on the board, but somebody's got a better suggestion. So always have a wish element. But it's about beginning to follow a time scale, even if you just do it 1 day a week. And I think most of us have managed how we, you know, just how we could really during this period. I don't know if that feels uncomfortable, but otherwise I think the shock for our students are going to be massive.
Yeah. Does anybody have any kind of questions or things to add at this stage?
I'm going to be trying it.
Yeah, same.
Definitely.
Same.
Absolutely.
I think Sam and I have got we've got some time coming up, haven't we? A little bit of time off each, couple of days here and there, and that's certainly going to be on my list.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a horrible thing. It just be that we've all agreed this is what we're going to do today, so that not one element, and it could just be, it can be not your child with dystrophy, it can be another child playing up, but people are not trying to pull and control for 1 day, that we're all following a.
But also it helps us as parents, isn't it? Because, you know, this is hard for us, isn't it? Not just for the children. And actually, you know, if you have got a day off work or a day to have to yourself with the kids, to then have some, you know, a whole day to fill is really, you know, I find it really hard personally.
Quite daunting, yeah.
When I've got, you know, usually working, I'm like, oh, I'm working, just go and sort yourselves out, have your 3 packets of crisps.
Yeah.
That's me, I'm a parent like that.
Yeah.
They go on the table and things like that, but actually to have a day with them is like, ooh, what do we do then?
I mean, you can put lovely things in. You can structure a really nice day with some lovely things, but it's very important within that day to have independent time as well, where you're all having half an hour or 20 minutes or 2 seconds, depending on the child that you've got.
We've had a point raised in the questions here. So lockdown meant a change in the outside world, but also in our little world at home. Personally, I've been finding planning and sticking to the routine with the little ones is actually causing more stress, friction or conflict. So I totally appreciate Claire's comment about sometimes it's okay to be more free flow.
Yeah, completely. And you know, when I was phoning families at the beginning, and even, you know, 3 weeks ago, I was just like, are you okay? Are you okay as a family unit? Actually, that was all I was bothered about. And if I thought that we were going back into lockdown, I would be saying the same thing. Literally, you know, we have to survive, and we've got to be well, and we've got to look after each other and not kill each other, ideally. However, because we are, in theory, slowly beginning to prepare to go back to some greater normality, it's about, these are some of the ideas that you just need to have around when that becomes a reality. So if for your child, so I've got some tracky children that are not going back, and not going back to in this school year at all. We're not even looking at till January. So I wouldn't be saying these things, because there would be no point in doing this, because then the going back to school is not imminent for them. So I'd be saying very much the same. It's around nurturing and building activities in the day. So this is around basically just trying to prepare for the next stage when you know you're going back to school.
Shall I move it to the next one,
Yeah,
Claire?
would you mind?
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
I've got my little friend sitting here.
Oh, he can come do it if you want.
And I was going to say you should come and join.
Oh.
He's a bit shy, he won't.
Okay. So, you know your family, and you know what it takes to tick. So I would just choose certain elements that you begin to build some structure in. But the main one appears to be around sort of mental health and well-being, is that in terms of preparation for going back to school is around getting dressed. And I know lots of our children need a great deal of help getting dressed, and that's a whole procedure. But and I think we've all lived in leggings and tracksuit bottoms and things that are comfy. But I think it's about slowly building in a routine to get up and dressed before those 2 or 3 weeks you go back to school. Don't suddenly start that on the Saturday and the school goes back on Monday, because that's not probably going to go well. Time outside has been one of the most beneficial, even if it's just with the doors open, get some fresh air. And then I often use this phrase, reset before bedtime. It's about making sure you can get 2 or 3 minutes or longer with them one-to-one to find out how the day's been for them and what's going on. I think in terms of mental health and well-being, the whole reset before bedtime is often the most useful time of the day. And always focus on the positives. Generally in life, I tend to do that as a whole. So let's not focus on what went wrong or the row that happened when everything got tipped over. Just focus on a nice thing. I don't know, Sam, if you got control, whether you can flip it over. Oh, yes. Oh, perfect. So I'm going to I've put the link in the notes for a TED talk by somebody called Lisa Guernsey, and she's a really interesting practitioner around should children have screens or access to digital media at all. And I'm not going to show it now. You can obviously watch it if you're interested, but it's probably not the message that you think. Most people think screens are bad and screen time is bad. But if we use it properly, screens help build that pathway in their brain, build new pathways. It's only when I'm picking up young people who play it for 8 hours in a go and don't do anything else that then it becomes quite damaging. So screens and computers are not bad, but think about what you can do with them. There's the digital things about colouring, dot to dot, jigsaws we've talked about, but also if you've got older students and older children, start thinking about skills like Photoshop, editing. Most children want to take your phone and Snapchat and give you horrible noses and sparkly ears. And we often go, give me my phone back, stop doing that. But actually you're teaching them editing and photo editing. So it's around using the media to teach them skills. Also, I know a lot of our young men love Lego, and there's some great free coding for Lego online. So again, if you Google online coding, some great stuff that's free, and you can build Minecraft, Roblox type things. And it's that process rather than just playing a game for game's sake. It's about learning a skill. And again, we've looked at movie and music. Some of our children love music and have great knowledge on certain areas, so that they could do a movie quiz or a music quiz.
Claire, we have a collaboration with Purple Mash, and we have the Action Duchenne School, which means that anybody can register through us for free. So all the coding stuff is on there. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Sam or I to get past details for that, they'd be very, very welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, the coding is such a step into the future, and you can get quite instant results. So if you have children that have quite short attention spans, you don't have to do too much work to get quite a quick result. And I know Anthony at Purple Mash, so I know Purple Mash well, and they're really great on helplines. If you get stuck, you can just message them, and they'll do a live chat and talk you through it.
They also have obviously the younger section as well. So if the children are kind of 2 or so years kind of previous to what you would expect at that level, you can go kind of down a bit, can't you? But it's not kind of classed as that.
No, you can just
it's
go
not
in
awkward,
and pitch it. No. So yeah, don't banish screens. They can be our saviours. It's only when we're on them all the time that there's a problem. Okay, thanks, Annette. Okay, so what does new normal look like? As I said, I think I've been living my life of new normal generally with my job forever, but I think the most important thing that we'd want a young person going towards adulthood to be able to do is just be. And that means just be. That means you don't need somebody instantly. Obviously, you know, some of your children will need you for care needs and to get things, but it's just learning to be with yourself. So whether that be a passion you have, a strength you have, we have a lot of students with SEN generally, not just dystrophy, who are very high maintenance in terms of attention and needing support. And it's a real journey. And I'm looking at Sam because Jude went on a journey when he went to secondary school, because he arrived at secondary school, and I hope you don't mind, Sam, but he was like, ta-da, I'm here. And Sam had worked with me, and we'd got him in a school where there were other kids with dystrophy, cerebral palsy, arthrogryposis, a whole range of more complex needs. And he was like, whoa, I'm suddenly not the celebrity I was where I was before. And that was incredibly difficult. I don't know if, Sam, you feel it, but it was really difficult for him.
Definitely. It
really difficult. And then he did the whole, I'm going to be aloof in the library and somebody will notice me if I sit on my own every lunchtime. And we noticed him, but we didn't respond. Unfortunately, I've got this phrase that life will sort you out. And he needed to work out where he was within the pecking order to be the young man that he is now. Because, you know, I kept saying to the primary school, stop making him this celebrity. But he's such a huge character. It was really difficult because he just was wonderful. So especially if you've got a child that they're the only one with dystrophy in a school, sometimes it can become quite an amazing world around them, but also they're not used to being just within themselves and sorting themselves out, because there's this people rushing to help them all the time.
They've got slaves.
Yeah. We did have a few targets, I think, around, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Break time and his crisps, but anyway, so I would say that that's where I'm trying to get your children to be, so they can just be. I would also say, you know, don't focus purely on the academics. Some of you will have academic children. Some of you will have children 3-4 years behind where they should be. It's about who are they, what are their strengths, and how can we celebrate. So I would strongly recommend, I'm sure you do photograph, but there's a great app called 1 Second a Day where they just take a picture. Now it could be their toes, it could be their breakfast, it could be, you know, them hanging out of bed, but it builds a diary through the year. You can start it, and it's just a great way of annotating, because then what you get at the end is like a flicker show of their year. And I think there's nothing wrong with starting at mid-year. I'm an SEN lady. I'm quite rebel in terms of rules. So there's nothing to start. You couldn't start it on the first, but it's a lovely record. So if they've got access to an old phone or your phone, it's a great thing to do. And actually everybody in the family can have their own one and make their own record. A time capsule. I am very much hoping we don't go through this again, ever. So it may be a way over the next 5 weeks of just putting things and then burying it somewhere and building a capsule that is about your family and your experience of COVID. Now, you might not put it in the garden, you might put it in the loft, but maybe 30 years later we'll find that and you'll remember what made your family tick over the last 16, 18 weeks. But I think it's something that everybody should contribute to. I've thrown magic tricks in because a lot of my dystrophy boys watch endless YouTube too, and they are amazing. We don't quite know what Christmas is going to look like for most of our families, but magic is something that lots of people spend a lot of time learning. So if you haven't floated that, there's lots on YouTube that's very useful. There's an amazing charity that works with a hemiplegia society, and if you are interested, I can put you in contact with them. But they teach magic for children with cerebral palsy, with one-sided cerebral palsy, to use 2 hands. And I think the same approach would work really well with your children as well. Helen's put a thumb up, so obviously I'll send you the details. But they do amazing. They do circus school classes, and it'd be lovely to do it online for you as a group. And then I've thrown Dragon's Den in as my last pitch, because life's life, and you know it's very difficult for you all when you have a diagnosis. I have the absolute honour often of travelling the same path as you, alongside you. So I met Sam before Sam knew really with Jude, and I've been on the June journey with Sam so far. I think I might retire before Jude finishes school, but I'm more Sam's going now. And it's very difficult when somebody says this may happen, but I can't tell you when, or this may happen. The reality is we don't know. Nobody knows when whatever's going to happen. So I think we should just plan for life. I think, you know, lots of children are, as Sam was saying, are fascinated by money. And think of something that you can do as a family, whether it's cooking cakes, selling it to somebody, you know, some online art that they can put in a picture frame. It's around this resilience and a reason to be here, and a reason and a path in life. Now, you'll all have your own talents within a family, but it's about I often talk to young people now. I see some students are sort of maybe 14, 15, dystrophy lads, and I say, what do you want to be? And they'll say a doctor. And I say, okay. And then I'll say some, well, I don't know, because I don't know what's going to happen. And I think it's really important for all our children of all ages to have pathways in life. For children that don't have SEN, one day they want to be a rocket scientist, the next day they want to work in ASDA, and we flip and change. And I think for our dystrophy children, they should have the same. They might be different goals, but they should have pathways that they see. I work with a lot of older teenage young people who struggle to know where they're going. Now, they might choose not to do it, but, you know, I've taught somebody, they didn't want to do PE, they couldn't do PE. PE was a massive issue, and it didn't matter how much we sold their stretchers during PE, that wasn't going to happen. So he did his stretchers at another time, and in PE, we taught him to do Photoshop. And he's now in the first year of A-levels doing the most amazing Photoshop digital artist. So that came from him having an absolute wobble around the age of 8 about not being able to do PE. And I was saying, What do you want to do? He said he wanted to put my head on top of an apple, and I said, well, we'd have to teach you Photoshop, and that's what we taught him, and that's his pathway now. So it's about making sure we have opportunities for our students and children with dystrophy as well. Okay, I've just thrown this in because I'm not an expert. I have the honour most of the time to doing quite a few home visits. I end up knowing the siblings, particularly if they go to the same school. Sometimes if they've got older siblings, I'll ask to meet with them, including when I met with Jude's brother in a cupboard because it's the only place we could find. But I'm always interested. And I was talking to Lynette and Sam about sometimes I think parents particularly overthink things, and they think sometimes things are bigger issues than they are. And really what I've tried to do is pick out the common themes when I've worked with brothers and sisters. The strongest one by far is fairness. And the next strongest one is like top and bottom is the impact on mum or dad. And they will always say, I'm worried about mum because they're so tired, or mum never eats, or mum never sits down, or mum is always trying to do everything. So you may not think that, you know, brother or sister are watching you, but they're watching the impact on you. Most children generally process what's going on to their brother or sister in the time scale they are. Most of it's around fairness, around children with dystrophy not playing a fair role in the family home, and the others around the impact on mum or dad. And most of them will never tell mum or dad. So they're the two strong things that come out. And really, if you then do the things that I've put in the middle, just as some suggestions around having roles, so everybody has a job to do in the house. You need to try and look for time together and time apart. You know, as adults, if we all went on holiday together, we'd all want some time away from each other as well as together. And, you know, it's very, very difficult, particularly if some of you are working parents, to get one-to-one time. But actually, when I've talked to siblings, they're talking about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, where it's uninterrupted, that they can just say something, have a 5-minute conversation without somebody from the other room saying, Mum, I just need a drink, or Mum, I need water. I've never met a child of a sibling with dystrophy or any other SEN who wants more than 5 or 10 minutes because they want to get on with their life. What they want is uninterrupted time. So I'm not quite sure how you can build a barricade around you just for 10 minutes. But that's why some of the things we were talking about earlier was around independence and just being able to be for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then some of that so that you can get a cup of coffee and just have some sanity as well. It's around also having that conversation about how much do I need you? So when they keep, you know, a child keeps shouting, Mom, Dad, it's around, do they want your attention or do they need you for something specifically? So it's around getting them to scale that on a 1 to 5. So can you wait 2 minutes? Is it, you know, do you need to be helped to the toilet? That's different. Or is it just simply that you want me to get another toy off the top shelf and bring it to you? So it's about getting them to scale. So if somebody is shouting mum or dad, that you can say, well, is it a 2 or is it a 5? And then you can judge whether they can wait 2 or 3 minutes. Social stories are very useful generally. If you've got children who are developmentally delayed or have got ASD, there's a whole range of social stories. I'll email Lynette and Sam my website, but there's a whole range of social stories about COVID, going back into school, turn taking, brothers and sisters. So social stories can be quite useful for children who need things very clear and very simple. Most of our siblings want some time away, so with cousins and friends, so clubs, etc. And then, to be honest, most of mine say, well, I know he can't do that, but that's all right with me. And they're very matter of fact. And I think certainly for parents are looking for that difference all the time. And my experience of siblings is they do know, and they can say exactly how it is. The last thing I would throw into the mix is get a jam jar and put some things that everybody wants to contribute in, whether that's something to do, something to buy, something to eat, and so that everybody has an input. And then you pick it out, and then whoever gets chosen, whether you're the child with disability or, you know, the poor mum who always gives up the last choice of what food you're going to eat because you're just giving in because it's easy. Okay. I've only just added some extra things because I think, you know, as I said at the beginning, when I've been checking in with my families, most of them are loving lockdown. Maybe mums and dads aren't, but the children are. They're thriving. I've got some children that have come on so much from being at home. But just with a view about going back to school, I think you just need to bear in mind that you probably do need to mention the school word if that's on your agenda for going back. Begin to talk about it. We talked about maybe videoing a trip to the supermarket so they can see about the changes that are in place, people wearing masks in the street, just so if they haven't seen that, because that's a shock if you've been shielding. But the reality is, if children and young people feel safe, they'll learn. So if we prepare them and we transition them, they'll learn. When you don't feel safe and anxiety takes over, then they won't learn. So don't worry about school. School will always be there. Lessons will be there. Things to learn will always be there. You've got to have a resilient child to go back to school before we worry about maths and studying. And just bear in mind about separation anxiety. This is going to be as much for you as it is for them because we've all been together so long. And lots of our families who are split families, they haven't been spending the weekend with dad or everybody's been locked together. So just be kind to yourself, and however much you're looking forward to that day when you are dropping them off and you are running in the other direction, you will miss them and you will worry because you've been together so long. So if I was looking at summer holidays, I would say do a little bit of learning, but please don't buy W.H. Smith's workbooks. Please don't get textbooks. Please try and learn in a different way. Learn the skills for learning without making children sit down, because that's just my own view. Okay. I think I might put an extra slide in. And then anxiety, really, it's just about looking at what you can do. In terms of anxiety, the most important thing you can do as mum or dad is to validate how somebody feels. The worst thing that you can do is that you can say, yeah, I know, and then you don't validate it. So it may be that you don't feel worried about something or you don't feel angry, but by telling somebody that you hear them and you can understand why they're cross is the most important thing you do. But the rest of it is all common sense. It's around, you know, if you're going to go somewhere new, you research together, you look it up online so they can visualize, they can see, and look for patterns around anxiety if anxiety is going to be there. There's going to be very few children in the country that are not worried about going back to school. So just because your child has a disability, all children are going to be quite nervous about what it looks like, what their classroom's going to be, who their teacher's going to be. And that's really my message to end on, really, is just let children be who they are. We've talked about a little bit about taking back control and building a bit of structure in, but we've all got here. And you're all looking very glamorous, the ladies that I can see, but I think a lot of us have got here by doing a little bit of that on the way. We've all given in. We've all just done things that make life quite easy for ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. So don't beat yourself up. And the suggestions that I've made tonight are really just around the next steps if you're beginning to think about preparing to go back to school or college. If you're not, then maybe there's some ideas to play around with, but the things we've talked about today are around that gradual transition back to school and college, and hopefully give you some ideas to do as a family. I'm very conscious that I've talked and I've talked. I'm not going to show you the video. I'm just going to send you the link. But if you've got 7 minutes of your time, I would watch that one TED talk, because this lady's amazing. Her son she's a French lady, and he was diagnosed with Fragile X. And her whole take on having a child who gains a diagnosis and then what she thinks she gains from life. And her main message, she's much more eloquent than I am. It's around pacing herself, pacing her family. This young person doesn't do rushing anywhere. And she's saying that what she's gained from this is around, because he can't be rushed and he needs to be told where he's going and what he's doing, that she's gained a lot in terms of her life. So if you've got 7 minutes, watch the TED talk. She's really, really good. She speaks much better than I do.
And actually that's quite, I think that personally, that's why I've enjoyed lockdown, because life is 1,000 miles an hour, being everything to everybody all the time. And actually when you drop a few, you haven't got to cater for all the friends that come round, and you haven't got to do this and that, you just got to focus on your work and your kids. It makes everything much slower. I don't know if you're nodding. Do you agree,
Yeah.
guys?
No, I agree, definitely. Definitely. That's slow thing. I think just as well, just not having to, sort of over this time, not having to rush around to different clubs and appointments and here, there and everywhere, those things that you do without thinking because they're just part of your weekly routine, actually having those all taken away has really made it a lot calmer and a lot, I
don't know. I mean, they were just some ideas and some suggestions, but I was just trying to think that if I was the teacher receiving your child back in September, what would help them, number one, transition back in, but also have them slightly more prepared for a school, whatever that may look like, whether that's primary, secondary, special school. I think most people are going to find that a challenge. I have to say, the children that have gone back in the bubbles have thrived, have absolutely loved it. So again, the anxieties were about what might happen, and then it didn't happen. So the children that who've gone to school have absolutely thrived. But again, they've had a whole school to themselves and not many children, so they've had run of the place.
I'm sure you guys have seen the note from Florence to saying, obviously it's unknown when the lockdown will end. Especially in Action Duchenne, we've been really thinking very hard, haven't we, the last couple of weeks about the families that have been in lockdown and have been shielding, and now the kind of the changes on the way out of lockdown. And it has been hard physically and also emotionally for everybody. But it's also okay to let family and friends know when we're struggling, and to remember to be kind to ourselves. Yeah, absolutely. And also to our partners, friends, family who are trying to help us, I think, as well. Florence said, thank you so much for your practical advice, Claire. Absolutely, same from me. I know Sam just adores you.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you so much.
The only little bit of advice I would give to you ladies as somebody who's been shielding is that we've been shielding to protect my daughter who's got very complex medical needs. But because the shielding's coming to the end for most people officially, then I am just being bombarded, and I know she is. It's as if people feel like a light switch has gone on and suddenly we can all go back to everyday life, and we can't. To keep her safe, we can't. And it's almost, you feel quite rude when people say, well, can't you come round, or can't I come to your house? And I'm saying, well, yeah, maybe you can come in the garden and I'll cook lunch, but we eat in the garden. And why, shieldings, and I'm saying, but shielding's just advice, and it's that period of time. So I don't know whether you all experience the same, but I've certainly been, because we haven't seen anybody physically, people have just assumed that like come the 1st of August we can all suddenly
it's
be
true.
out and about. And
there's a number of families that we're supporting actually, and a couple that spring to mind. I don't know if you're the same, Sam, that have said exactly the same thing.
Oh, definitely.
Perhaps they've got family members who haven't really adhered to any social distancing, and they're now hoping to come and see them. And it's it's very difficult because you're having to say no to people that you love. So that puts the pressure on, and I tell you immediately that makes your stomach just drop, doesn't it? And you get that stress again, you get that anxiety feeling of, oh my gosh, I should be doing this, what should I be doing? But actually, if you bring it back and say, actually, we can't right now, it's okay, we'll be out at some point, but I want to take it, it needs to be at our own pace. And I've done that a couple of times. We're the biggest party house that we're noisy, whatever, and we're always out there partying, and I've had to say to people, no, I'm really sorry, but people are actually like, okay, that's fine.
I mean, also, I've got friends that have haven't followed the rules, and they still don't really think they should wear masks, and they're sort of saying, well, can I just pop in? And I'm just saying, you're happy to follow if you want to do that, that's fine, but you can't come in my house, because I haven't done 18 weeks for nothing. So I understand for all of you, because I'm in a similar pathway, not myself, but obviously I'm protecting. So it's a challenge, isn't it?
It is. Does anybody have anything they want to add or anything they want to say before we close? Oh, hi, Sajal.
Hello.
Hello.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. That really was useful. I mean, particularly for us, I think it's more on the independence as well. I think, as you said, it's so easy just to do things. And but no, thank you so much. There's a lot of food for thought there. But thank you. Appreciate your time.
I was just conscious you're probably quite a mixed, audience in terms of age range. But I was just trying to choose maybe common themes that I see.
Yeah, no, it's really
and I'm always nagging Sam, and I'm always saying to Jude, don't do that. And he's just a delight, but it's about age appropriate expectations around boundaries, and and it's so easy.
So Claire's returning on the 25th of August, which is the other end of the holidays. We'll hopefully be thinking about this and thinking about the day when we go, yay! And then cry, obviously.
No, I'll be crying because I have to go back to work, so I won't be. At the moment, I'm slightly giddy. I'm like, oh, but no, I love it.
So what we'll be doing, we're going to be probably covering, I guess, some of your super hacks for school, and kind of integrating into school, making sure the schools is including the young person.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I learned when I came to the conference is I'm just in this blissful bubble that I think everybody does the same as the schools in my borough. And what I learned really, really strongly at your conference was, it really isn't like that across the UK. So for me, it would be around absolutely what your expectation should be as a family. And so if I know that I can make my schools do that, then there's no reason that you shouldn't go with that expectation. So I think just in terms of anxiety, one of the first things we got our schools to do was do the video. This is the new way into school. This is the new place. This is what you do. This is where you go. And actually all our SEN children loved that. Even if they weren't ready to go back to school, but they watched because they were like, why is that yellow? And why don't we go in that door? And just that beginning preparation. So I'm not saying that we get it right completely, but when I came to your conference, it was just such an eye-opener about how different it is in different areas in the country. So maybe, we look at what you can do. And again, before I do that, it'd be really useful to know if any of you have got children in special school or mainstream. My experience is both, but I will pitch it for both if I know some of you are going to have children in special school as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. As I'm sure you can tell, I just pinned you there so that I can use that clip to share on social media.
That's not good.
Thank you, Claire, so much. And thank you guys for joining us. And as I say, we will share this out again so that you can share with your teams. Thank you all so much.
Thank you
Love
for
to
being
see
so
you.
kind.
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. It's been amazing.
Oh, bye, Florence. I can see Florence now.
Oh, Florence is on. Oh,
nice to meet you.
thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.